The courtroom was already packed. A sea of murmuring voices, shifting bodies, reporters clutching notepads, and cameras hidden in silence, all waiting for the show to begin. Then the door creaked open. He walked in with the arrogance of a man who'd never been told no. Carter Langston, billionaire, mogul, master manipulator. He wore a charcoal designer suit tailored to perfection, the kind that didn't just say, "I'm rich." It whispered untouchable. His shoes gleamed. His silver cufflinks sparkled. He didn't walk. He glided, chin up, shoulders back, a smirk resting comfortably on his face like he was arriving at a gala, not a courtroom where he faced charges of defrauding hundreds of working-class families. He looked around the room like it belonged to him, but what happened next, no one saw coming. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Amina Rhodes," the bailiff announced. And just like that, the crowd stood, in unison, benches creaking under the sudden movement. All except one man. Carter Langston didn't move. He stayed seated, flipping casually through a legal pad, as if the announcement didn't apply to him. As if she didn't matter. The room froze. The tension hit like a held breath. Even the bailiff hesitated, eyes flicking between the judge's bench and Langston. His attorney leaned in, whispering something urgently. But Langston brushed him off with a flick of his hand, like a king dismissing a court jester. Judge Amina Rhodes took her seat slowly. She didn't raise an eyebrow. She didn't ask why. She didn't have to. The silence grew heavy, colder. She adjusted her robe, glanced once in Langston's direction, and simply said, "You may be seated." It wasn't loud, it wasn't sharp, but it landed like thunder, because everyone in that room felt it. The quiet power of a woman who didn't need to shout to command authority. And Carter Langston, he smirked, just slightly, like it was all part of the game. But what he didn't realize is that the rules were about to change. And the judge he refused to stand for, she was about to teach him what justice really looked like. Carter Langston didn't start out wealthy. He was once a college dropout with a borrowed laptop and a silver tongue. But what he lacked in education, he made up for in charm, and an uncanny ability to smell desperation. He built Langston Capital from the ground up. Or so the stories said, but the truth was messier. Langston didn't build wealth. He siphoned it. He promised working families a future. Retirement without worry. Double your savings in a year. No risk. Guaranteed. And people believed him. Because Langston didn't just sell investment plans. He sold hope. He stood on stages in church basements and community centers, shaking hands with single moms and retired mechanics. His tailored suits and confident smile were like armor, protecting him from scrutiny, while making others feel like they finally had a seat at the table. What they didn't know was that the table was rigged. The money never went where it was supposed to. The investments were fake. The returns, fabricated. And while his clients clipped coupons and skipped meals to make their monthly deposits, Carter Langston was buying yachts and throwing rooftop parties in Manhattan. At the height of it all, Langston was everywhere. Business magazines called him the people's billionaire. Talk shows praised his humble beginnings. Influencers posted selfies with him under hashtags like near boss moves and wealth vibes. But underneath the gloss was rot. When the Securities Commission finally launched an investigation, the numbers didn't lie. Over 200 million missing, thousands of accounts emptied, hundreds of lives upended. Yet through it all, Langston remained untouched, laughing in interviews, dismissing the charges as regulatory overreach. His army of attorneys filed motions, delayed hearings, and drowned prosecutors in paperwork. He was arrogant, calculated, and above all, convinced he'd never be held accountable. Because men like Carter Langston didn't go to jail. They wrote memoirs. They made documentaries. They got book deals and speaking tours. But Judge Amina Rhodes, she didn't care about fame or headlines. She cared about truth. And the truth was, Langston had crossed a line. Not just financially, but morally. He had preyed on people who trusted him. And now, those people were filling the courtroom seats. Waiting, watching, praying that for once, the powerful wouldn't get away with it. Langston still smiled, still winked at the cameras, but his empire, it was beginning to crack. And the woman behind the bench, she was holding the hammer. The third day of the trial began under heavy skies. Outside, the crowd was growing. Journalists, protesters, families holding worn photos and court notices. Some were quiet, others shouted into microphones. All of them were waiting for the same thing: justice. Inside the courtroom, the air felt electric. The prosecution called their next witness, a woman in her early 40s, hands trembling as she walked to the stand. Angela Meyer, single mother, former teacher. One of the hundreds who had trusted Carter Langston with her life savings. She clutched a small folder to her chest as she raised her right hand and took the oath. Her voice shook at first, barely above a whisper. I invested everything I had, not just my money, my kid's future. Langston didn't look up. Angela opened the folder, pulling out an old photograph. 2 young children, smiling on a school field. This is Noah and Lila, she said, her voice growing stronger. They were supposed to go to college with the money I saved. Instead, we lost our home. The courtroom was silent, even the judge's pen stilled. Langston leaned back, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Like this was just another speech. Another number on a spreadsheet. Angela turned to the jury. I begged his office for help when my withdrawals stopped. They said the market was fluctuating, that I should stay patient. I stayed patient until I was bankrupt. A sharp breath echoed from somewhere in the gallery. The prosecutor stepped forward, gently. Ms. Meyer, what impact did this have on your family? She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she said, my son dropped out of school to work full-time. My daughter developed anxiety attacks. I had to sell my wedding ring just to pay for groceries. And for the first time, Langston blinked. Not much, just a flicker. But Judge Rhodes noticed. So did the jury. Angela's voice didn't waver as she delivered her final words. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because someone has to say it. This man didn't just take our money. He took our faith. In people. In systems. In fairness. When she stepped down, the courtroom held its breath. Then came another witness. Then another. A retired firefighter. A disabled veteran. A grandmother raising 3 kids after her daughter passed away. Each of them stood. Each of them told their truth. And one by one, they chipped away at the armor Carter Langston had worn so confidently. His smirk faded. His jaw tightened. The man who once believed he was untouchable now looked like he was starting to feel the weight of every lie. But the most devastating blow, it hadn't landed yet. Judge Rhodes leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on Langston. Her silence was no longer neutral. It was gathering power. And what came next, he wouldn't be able to dismiss with a smirk. Carter Langston had spent his entire career dodging accountability. He knew how to spin a narrative, how to delay proceedings, how to outspend and outlast anyone who came after him. But this time, the old tricks weren't working, and he knew it. The next witness was called. A young analyst in his late 20s, nervous, clutching a stack of printed emails. He introduced himself as Nathan Kim, a former junior associate at Langston's investment firm. I worked under Mr. Langston for 3 years, Nathan began, voice cracking. I was in charge of compiling investor reports, overseeing account performance data, and sending scripted emails to clients. The prosecutor leaned in. Scripted emails? Nathan nodded. We were told to reassure clients no matter what the actual numbers showed. I once flagged a massive loss in a retirement portfolio, and my supervisor told me to rephrase it as a market correction, and to remind the client not to panic. Carter Langston's attorney stood objecting. Hearsay. Sustained, Judge Rhodes said. But her eyes stayed on Nathan. Stick to what you directly witnessed, Mr. Kim. Yes, Your Honor. He flipped to a specific page, his hands trembling. This is an internal memo, he said, sent by Mr. Langston himself. He was instructing senior staff to classify unredeemable assets as pending transfers to avoid triggering SEC reporting requirements. He paused. In other words, we were hiding the fact that some of the money was gone. The room froze. Carter shifted, finally, legs crossed, fingers tapping his jaw. But he wasn't smirking anymore. The prosecutor turned toward the judge. Your Honor, we move to admit this document as Exhibit 73. Langston's lawyer rose again. Your Honor, the authenticity of these documents will be verified, Judge Rhodes cut in sharply. But the court will hear the evidence. Nathan stepped down, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. Then came the final blow. A woman in a charcoal suit walked toward the bench. Tall, poised, a familiar briefcase in her hand. The room seemed to lean forward as she stated her name. Samantha Ellis, Federal Auditor, Department of Justice. Langston blinked. The judge's brows lifted. Ms. Ellis, the prosecutor asked, what is the result of your audit into Mr. Langston's firm? She opened the briefcase, pulled out a thick folder. In the past 18 months, she began, Mr. Langston's firm misrepresented over $47 million in client funds, misclassified over 80 assets, and moved at least $5 million into offshore accounts under shell corporations linked to his name. Gasps exploded across the courtroom. Langston leaned forward, lips parted slightly, eyes locked on the documents like they were a foreign language. And then, Samantha pulled out one last page. This is a wire transfer, she said, signed by Mr. Langston, moving funds from a client trust to a personal holding account. 2 days after that client passed away, the audience turned to Langston. His face had changed. The smugness was gone. So was the confidence. What remained was something else. Fear. For the first time, Carter Langston realized this courtroom wasn't another business meeting, and he wasn't going to talk his way out of this. Carter Langston sat frozen. His hands gripped the edges of the defense table like it might keep him afloat. But the tide had already turned. Judge Rhodes leaned forward, her voice sharp and deliberate. Mr. Langston, do you wish to respond to the documents presented by Ms. Ellis? He opened his mouth, closed it again. His lawyer whispered something. A desperate string of words that sounded more like damage control than strategy. Carter began, clearing his throat. I was unaware of these specific transfers. My firm handles dozens of accounts daily. The judge raised a hand. Stop. The room went still. You were unaware, she repeated, of multi-million-dollar transfers made into an offshore shell account registered to your own address? The silence was damning. The walls that had always shielded Carter, money, lawyers, privilege, were crumbling in real time. The prosecutor stood, voice firm. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence and the defendant's unwillingness to provide a clear explanation, the state moves to revoke bail immediately and request remand until sentencing. The crowd rippled. Langston's head whipped around to his lawyer. What? No. No. You said we had options. But the judge had already made her decision. Motion granted. Mr. Langston will be remanded into custody immediately. Gasps. Stunned silence. Then the sound of footsteps. 2 bailiffs approaching from either side. Carter Langston stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "You can't do this," he barked. "I've donated millions. I sit on hospital boards." "This is a courtroom, Mr. Langston," Judge Rhodes replied, unshaken. "Not a charity gala." As the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, Carter looked out over the crowd. Reporters with pens flying, former investors with tears in their eyes, Angela Martinez clutching a photo of her daughter, Peter Vaughn gripping the edge of his seat, all watching him fall. The man who once saw the world as a chessboard was now just another piece removed from the game. But it wasn't over yet. Judge Rhodes tapped her gavel. "This court will reconvene in 72 hours for sentencing. Until then, the defendant will remain in federal custody." As Carter was led away, a billionaire in handcuffs, no tie, no swagger. A quiet thunder built in the room. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pity. It was something far more dangerous to the powerful. Hope. The footage went viral before the courtroom lights even dimmed. Clips of Carter Langston in handcuffs played on every screen, from cable news to TikTok reels. His confident smirk had been replaced with wide, unblinking eyes. The billionaire who had once dismissed court orders like junk mail now looked like a man grappling with gravity for the first time in his life. In the heart of the chaos, Judge Monica Rhodes sat in her chambers, alone. The low hum of voices and reporters echoing through the marble halls outside her door. She didn't feel triumphant. She never did. Her job was never about humiliation. It was about restoring balance. And sometimes justice didn't roar. It whispered through every shattered illusion a man like Carter Langston held dear. Across town, at a modest community center, Angela Martinez watched the live stream with her kids. Her hands trembled as she held her youngest daughter close. "He's really going to jail?" the girl asked, eyes wide. Angela nodded slowly. "Looks like it, mija." And for the first time in years, she smiled. At a rundown apartment in East Oakland, Peter Vaughn cracked open a beer and toasted his reflection in the TV. "That's for every sleepless night," he muttered. "For every dollar you stole from my pension." The Justice Collective's office was chaos. Journalists called non-stop. Civil rights attorneys scrambled to prepare for what came next, because this wasn't just one man's downfall. It was the door cracking open on an entire network of corruption, and they were ready to push it wide open. Nora Ellis stood in the break room, pouring coffee, still catching her breath from court. A junior associate approached, young, nervous, inspired. "You really did that?" she whispered. Nora looked up. "No," she said simply. "We all did." But not everyone was celebrating. At Grayson Tower, the corporate headquarters of Langston's empire, boardroom lights burned late into the night. Phones rang. Lawyers arrived. Press officers drafted a dozen statements, none of them good enough to make this disappear. Stock prices plummeted by the hour. Donors pulled out. Investors panicked. Langston's name, once a golden ticket, had become toxic overnight. Even the building's janitor paused to watch the news on his phone. "Guess money can't buy everything," he murmured. But for all the headlines, the interviews, the justice served, the real victory was quiet. It was Angela getting a call from her landlord, offering her a chance to buy back her home. It was Peter's union reaching out to help recover stolen retirement funds. It was dozens of families finally daring to believe. Maybe the system could work for them too. In a world where power was often immune to consequence, the ripple had started, and it was only getting bigger. The courtroom was standing room only. Reporters, victims, court employees, they all returned. Not for the drama, but for the verdict. Outside, the media had set up camp. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Microphones waited for their chance to capture history. But inside, all eyes were on Judge Monica Rhodes. She entered without fanfare. No smile, no glance at the cameras. Just the slow, sure walk of a woman who knew the weight of her words. At the defendant's table, Carter Langston sat, shackled this time. No designer suit, no smirk, just a state-issued jumpsuit and eyes that scanned the courtroom, searching for a way out that didn't exist. Monica took her seat and adjusted the microphone. "Mr. Langston," she began, her voice even but laced with steel. "You've been found guilty on 12 counts of fraud, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud the public." Carter swallowed hard. "You built an empire on the backs of working people. You sold hope to the desperate and collected interest on their despair." Angela Martinez sat in the front row, holding her daughter's hand. Peter Vaughn stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "You treated this courtroom like a boardroom," Monica continued, "and justice like a negotiation." Her eyes locked with Carter's, sharp, unwavering. "But justice isn't bought." She paused. "Let it sink. Therefore, this court sentences you to 35 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 28. Gasps rippled through the room. Carter flinched, but Monica wasn't done. "In addition," she said, turning a page, "you are hereby ordered to pay $412 million in restitution, to be collected through full liquidation of all personal and business assets, including offshore holdings." Reporters' pens flew across notepads. Angela let out a shaky breath. Peter exhaled, slowly, like he'd been holding it for 10 years. "You will also forfeit all corporate control of Grayson Holdings," the judge added, "and are barred from holding any financial leadership position for the rest of your life." Carter opened his mouth to speak, but Monica raised a single hand. "You had your chance," she said, "and you wasted it." The silence that followed felt sacred, like a closing chapter written in bold ink. "Bailiffs," she ordered, "remove the defendant." Carter was led away, his head hanging, every step echoing like a closing door. Monica looked out at the gallery. "To those impacted," she said, voice softening, "this verdict cannot undo what was lost, but may it serve as a beginning, a place to rebuild, to heal, to believe again." Then she stood, gavel raised. "This court is adjourned." Crack. The sound echoed through the room, and through a nation watching. The courthouse emptied slowly. Some stayed to hug, to cry, to just breathe. Angela Martinez stepped outside into the cool afternoon sun. Her daughter, Sophia, clung to her arm, not out of fear, but relief. They didn't have their home back yet, but they had something else, a second chance. Peter Vaughn leaned against the railing, phone pressed to his ear. "It's over," he whispered. "We won." Then after a pause, "Yeah, I'm coming home." But inside Judge Monica Rhodes's chambers, there was no celebration, no champagne, no victory dance. Just a woman sitting alone, staring at the folder on her desk. Carter Langston's name printed in bold at the top. She closed it, and for a moment, she didn't feel like a judge. She felt like a daughter, a sister, a woman who remembered what it was like to be overlooked, underestimated, disrespected. She knew Carter's story wasn't unique. He was just louder, richer, more arrogant than most. But the systems that allowed him to flourish, still there, still dangerous, still targeting people who looked like her, like Angela, like Peter. And that thought, more than any verdict, reminded her, the work wasn't over. Across the city, the story dominated headlines. Billionaire falls from grace in historic courtroom reckoning. Black female judge sends powerful message. No one is above the law. Victims finally heard in landmark financial justice case. But Sophia's handwritten letter said it best. Thank you for showing us that justice isn't just for rich people. It's for people like us too. It hung on Monica's office wall now. A reminder, not of victory, but of why she does this work. And now to you. What does justice mean when the odds are stacked? What happens when truth finally gets a microphone and power is forced to listen? And maybe most importantly, if you had to stand up for something today, what would it be? If this story moved you, even just a little, don't let it fade into silence. Like, subscribe, and share this video so more voices can be heard. Because here at KaYi, we don't just tell stories, we ignite conversations. Until next time, stay bold, stay loud, and never stop fighting for what's right.